Welcome back. This time we're talking about Person of Interest, Season 5, Episode 4, 6741. Now this is going to be a full recap and review, so there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't seen this episode, hit stop now, go watch the episode, and then come back. Okay, let's jump in. Obviously, this is the episode that brings back Shaw, who's been missing since basically last season's episode, If Then Else. I know we got one little scene to show that she did indeed survive the end of that episode, but we really haven't had her as a character since then. And the result here is a highly emotional episode that also serves as a complete mind bender. It pretty much had me guessing all the way through exactly what was going on, and it doesn't reveal it until the very end. As the episode opens, we find Shaw, who has been captured by Samaritan and Greer, and is being experimented on and is being implanted with one of the chips that we again saw last season, and they're trying to brainwash her to become a asset. While this is going on, we see Greer and asset Jeremy Lambert discussing Shaw and how dangerous she's been to the organization and the possibilities of her turning and helping them destroy the machine once and for all. Later we see Lambert interrogating Shaw, trying to get information about our heroes and the machine, especially its location. And whatever the chip is attempting to do apparently isn't working, so Greer orders that another chip be installed, which may end up killing her, and he doesn't seem to care that much. Fortunately for those that are squeamish, we don't have to see the second surgery like we saw the first one, but we do see the aftermath, in which Shaw is able to escape, use Lambert as a human shield, discover that she's on an island, find a boat, and is able to apparently escape Samaritan's grasp. After we get back from the commercial, we find her in the city in a taxi cab. She leaves the taxi cab, goes into this pharmacy, starts picking up supplies to try to take out the chip on her own. This does not go well and leads to a blackout in which she wakes up and her hands are covered in blood and she doesn't know how much time she's lost. Though it does give her a plan. So she goes to the pharmacist and steals his phone and calls the police saying that she's about to kill him. This is an attempt to get the machine to zero in on her as a number. And unfortunately, Samaritan's agents show up first. She gets into a gunfight with them and is holding her own pretty well because she is Shaw. But then she has another episode where she sees these images that she was seeing from the beginning of the episode when they were brainwashing her, which allows the agents to get a drop on her. Fortunately, Root shows up at just the right time to save the day, and we have our reunion. And it's a wonderful moment in the episode where Shaw and Root get to see each other again. And that moment is just as sweet and as awkward as you would expect with these two characters. One who is pretty much insane most of the time, and the other one is a clinically diagnosed sociopath. Shaw, unfortunately, has another episode, which leads to another blackout. After the commercial break, Shaw wakes up in a subway car with John and Root proceeds to use a knife as a surgical device to remove the chip, and hopefully remove any influence the machine Samaritan might still have on her. This leads to another blackout, and when Shaw wakes up this time, she's at Root's apartment. And now the trio is joined by Finch. This leads to our first signs of friction within the group, as Shaw expresses some obvious displeasure over the fact that they never rescued her, and she's questioning just how much effort they put into that. Finch and John leave, and Root seems very eager to pick up where they left off with their kiss at the end of If Then Else. But at first, Shaw doesn't seem terribly in the mood. Shaw, however, quickly changes her mind, and this leads to a very intimate scene between Shaw and Root, which is just great for the characters. It's something that we've been waiting for ever since they revealed their feelings last season. And I have to admit, it's a pretty sexy scene. What else can I say? I do believe some buttons and some tableware definitely were harmed in the filming of this scene. This leads us to a scene of Root and Shaw in bed together, with Shaw discussing her NSA training, in which they try to teach her how to withstand torture by going to a safe place. Root innocently asks her what her safe place was, and in a heartbreaking moment, Shaw talks about how there was no safe place because the training was bunk, and they basically broke her. She admits to that. Well, not only in this scene, but basically the entire episode, Amy Acker and Sarah Shahi just nailed it. Every scene is just, whether it's funny, it's heartbreaking, romantic, it doesn't matter. They nail every emotion in this episode. Pretty much every scene in this episode is from the point of view of Shaw, and I'll get more into that later. But Sarah Shahi just has a wonderful return to person of interest in this episode. Later we see Shaw examining her wound, and when she touches it, she starts having flashbacks and starts losing time like she did when she had the chip in her, which gives us a hint that there's something more going on than just the chip. And when she wakes up from this, she sees herself holding Simtech and a gun that she'd seen Root locking away earlier. Root goes to meet John so they can discuss the situation and figure out what their next move is, but Shaw bugs her and overhears them discussing her. John definitely has some reservations on whether they really can trust Shaw, whether she was broken, and if she has turned somehow. I mean, he still cares about her and doesn't want to see her harmed, but is definitely concerned about the situation. And as we've seen with the previous scene, he's right to do so. Whatever they were going to come up with, though, is for naught, because Shaw shows up, confronts them, and decides she's tired of waiting and wants to take out Samaritan once and for all. So she grabs the bystander's phone and basically taunts Samaritan into coming and getting them. Well, of course, Samaritan's agents do show up. They see Shaw, and they chase her into the back of the diner that they were in. And right after they call in their report that they've cited Shaw, Root and John show up just in time to knock him out. And this allows them to steal the agent's phone and triangulate where that last call was made to, which leads them to a Samaritan hideout where Greer is. And they manage to take out the guards and capture Greer. I mean, this is big news. They've been, Greer's been a primary bad guy for a season and a half now. They take Greer to the catacombs underneath the church, which apparently the thick stone is serving as a Faraday cage and should protect them from any tracking device that Greer might have on him. Shaw threatens to torture Greer, but instead they begin to search him, trying to find any kind of device he might have on him, convinced he might have some kind of kill switch, because he doesn't completely trust his own God. And Shaw discovers a scar on his arm, and a little bit more back alley surgery, she's able to find a USB drive implanted in his arm. Finch investigates it and discovers that it indeed has some code written by Samaritan's creator, and he believes it is actually a kill code. That if it's installed in a networked device, it could actually defeat Samaritan once and for all. So Finch and Root go off to implant this code and see if it will actually work, while John and Root stay behind to guard Greer. Well, John hears some noises above, so he goes to investigate, leaving Root to guard Greer. And he begins to monologue, the villain that he is, and starts taunting her about how everything is going according to plan. When she questions him, he tells her that it was her idea all along to implant a USB drive. And she starts having another episode and starts talking about how they removed the chip. And he goes, well, the chip was nothing. We broke you months ago. And how the USB drive is indeed a kill code, but not what they were hoping it was, implying that it would actually destroy the machine, or at the very least lead them to the machine's location. Greer continues to taunt her, talking about how no matter what she wants to do, she could never hurt him. Well, she quickly proves that wrong by shooting him in the head during her episode. Well, John returns to find Greer dead, It's a little suspicious, but with Samaritan agents on their way, they have to flee. John calls Finch to tell him to not plug in the USB drive, but it's too late. And apparently Samaritan agents are on their way. John tells him to leave, but Finch says he can't abandon the machine. So John and Shaw are going to have to go to the machine and help protect it. Along the way, however, John becomes suspicious of Shaw and begins questioning her actions. In response, Shaw shoots him in the back, leaves him bleeding in the alley. Root calls, and Shaw lies about what happened to John, and Root says that she's coming to get her. Shaw sees some Samaritan agents and then begins to flee. Later, she catches up with Root, and it's obvious Shaw wants to confess what she did, but Root's more interested in trying to escape. Shaw ultimately leads her to a playground, which looks very similar to the scenery that she's been seeing in her visions. Once there, Shaw finally confesses that she's the one that shot John, which begins just the best scene in a already fabulous episode. I've already mentioned the acting between these two actresses, but holy crap, this is just this tops it right here. Root's trying to talk her down, telling her that they can make this work. She doesn't care. She loves Shaw. And Shaw begins to talk about referencing that earlier conversation in bed about the safe place, and she says she did have a safe place at the very end when things just got too bad, and Root was always her safe place. And then basically says that she wants this to end and she can't hurt Root, so she pulls the gun on herself and kills herself. And I mean, we finally get Shaw back and she's dead. And then, I've mentioned the acting, but the camera work in this episode too. And we see this scene of this merry-go-round spinning, and then as it keeps spinning, suddenly there's like a mirror part of this merry-go-round, and we see a reflection of Shaw back at the beginning of the episode with these electrodes stuck to her head and this goggle that they were showing the images originally. And we find out that this entire episode, or at least 98% of this episode, was a simulation concocted by Samaritan and Greer as they try to unlock where the machine is hidden. And we find out that this was simulation number 6741. And we finally find out where we get our episode title from. And they quickly begin the next simulation. End of episode. Boom. As I said, this was a mind bender of an episode. I was noticing things as this episode went on, and a lot of things were things that I was actually going to nitpick about until I found out that this was entirely a simulation, and then it kind of made sense. I noticed, especially in the second viewing as I was getting ready for this video, on how, not necessarily the acting, but how the characters were being portrayed, especially John and Finch, and on a lesser scale, Root. They just seemed very generic. Their lines were somewhat generic. Their actions seemed to be very one note. I mean, John especially, he just seemed, he seemed almost a caricature of himself. And I have to think, because I tend to give the writers credit on this show, that this was purposeful because it was Samaritan's simulation of them. Another thing I noticed in the second viewing was just the way the episode was edited. It seemed very stop-jerky at times. And again, that makes sense in retrospect when you find out this entire thing is a simulation in her head. I am left with one question, though. Since this simulation is into the thousands now, and obviously at least these most recent versions are post-season finale, how long these simulations actually take to happen. Are they happening in real time? Because it was about a day and a half, and even if you take into account that it's been, say, 9 months since she was originally kidnapped, you don't have enough time to do that in real time. So I have to imagine there's somehow sped up. It does put a rather kind of icky feel if they can actually watch what she's seeing, especially with the scene that she shared with Root. That's a little disturbing. Actually, it's a lot disturbing. But in any event, I have to say this is an amazing episode. Just an acting showcase on the part of Sarah Shahi and Amy Acker, and just is one of those reasons why I love this show, is episodes like this. It actually kind of reminded me of the episode, and I can't think of the name of it right now. It was the one where John is having those kind of lucid hallucinations and sees Carter again. We see and we realize the flashbacks are actually hallucinations. So yeah, when they commit to one of these sort of mind bender episodes, it reminds me of Fringe in a way, of how they just manage to pull these kind of episodes off. They don't do them too many times. They don't try to cram it in when it's not necessary. But when they do an episode like this, and to be able to combine it with the emotional reunion, even though ultimately none of this is real, I mean, the character interactions are just, even, we get to see Bear. Bear gets to reunite with Shaw. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we do get our real reunion, how it's going to live up to this, because they definitely set the bar very high. So let me know what you thought of this episode. Please comment below. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other TV and movie reviews. And until next time, watch out for Samaritan.